Well, good morning. Good morning. My name is Dick Dingas, and I'm with the Virginia Beach Friends of IANDS, along with our other board members, Jeff. Where's Lloyd? I saw him. There he is. Okay, and welcome to this morning's program. We have a good program that's about to begin. I want to make some announcements first. Thank you for your donation. This meeting is being recorded to my Zoom cloud. And if you want to share it with a friend afterwards, just get in touch with me and I'll send you the link. There's no extra charge. And then you can share it with your friends if you want. If you're not on our email list to receive announcements of the programs that we have, we ask that you sign up, and you can sign up at the table. I have a tablet. I'll put it over on that chair if you want to use it there. For 2024, we're moving to Fellowship of the Inner Light. The meetings won't be here any longer. Fellowship of the Inner Light, and you'll get an announcement of it by your emails. We have a, do we have a drawing today? Okay. If you like near-death experiences and like to learn about them, I have a meeting at my home every week, and in which I feature mostly a near-death experiencer or someone who's had an ET experience. And you can learn more about it in a brochure on the table. It's called Strangers No More. If you brought a cell phone with you today, you might want to silence it at this time to avoid embarrassment. We have a format for today. We have a panel of 4 people. Each one of them is going to present, and then the other panelists will have a chance to experience, to share on that topic. And then the audience will be able to ask questions. But we have 4 of them. Each of them has a half hour for a cycle. And our first one is Neil.
Good morning. My goodness, a nice group. Yeah, we're transitioning, as he's saying. I came in about 14 years ago and seen a lot of your faces, and we've talked about UFOs, but it's time to move on. And we're doing that physically, and today I'm going to talk about doing that collectively. Because the last UFO thing we've had here, you can't hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I love it.
Okay. The last one of the UFO meeting we've had here was before the pandemic. So in this time frame, the last 5 years, the government has started to declassify a lot of the information that I've known, and I'll tell you about that briefly. And it's helpful. And then there's a book. I'm a part of an organization called FREE, Fundamental Research into Extraterrestrial and Extraordinary Experiences. It came out of an outspring of the astronaut Ed Mitchell. I knew Ed well. I had him up here speaking to us here before his death about 5 years ago. When he went on Apollo 14, and on the way back, he saw the face of God coming back from the moon. And it talked to him about that he really needed to do something else besides being an astronaut. And he had gotten his PhD from MIT. He was considered to be the next chief astronaut. So when he got back and was in the debrief, and he said, I'm going to retire, NASA was really, I was sort of on the fringe of that at the time. NASA was really angry. I said, no, you can't retire. You're going to be our chief astronaut. And Ed Mitchell said, no, I've got a new agenda. And I'm going to start what he did was called the Institute of Noetic Sciences in California. And I was a part of that and still am to some extent. And then he left that, and the people who stayed there, I know quite well at IANDS. But then he came and he started a group before his death called his Fundamental Research. And as Dick and most of you know, I dislike reading. I usually barely ever will bring a note up when I'm speaking, but I want to read some of this stuff from you. let me give you a little bit more of my background. I was all in the 90s, professor at George Washington University, and invited to be a part of the government. The government has been problematic in UFO activities all this time. There have been administrations and presidents and leaders who have tried to be more open, and then there have been presidents and Congresses that have wanted to pretty much keep it valid, and NASA and other administrations. There have been reasons for this. Simply, they say they don't want to scare us. And the other part of it that is a little bit sinister is right, Eisenhower talked about it, a government military industrial complex. That's pretty greedy. And they want to control all of this stuff because they want to sell. And I had a memo, I came across a memo from a Lockheed Martin executive saying, we've got to paint aliens as bad people who are going to kill us and change us, because we want to build a whole satellite system in space that, quote unquote, will see them coming, so we can deflect them. And it only costs about 50 billion, you know, and we want to sell that to Congress. And they have, Lockheed Martin and Boeing and these others, they have set aside money to influence Hollywood. And there was a TV show, I don't know, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, I couldn't watch it, I think called 4 or something like that, where they had, and it was on one of the networks every Thursday night, if I remember, and they had the extraterrestrials as being very cunning, coming in saying we're your friends and all that, and really being very diabolical. And that's what the military industrial complex wants to paint, that picture. So that we'll be afraid of extraterrestrial activity and extraterrestrial beings. And so in the 90s, I was invited to sit on a committee. The government's pretty smart. They know under the laws that if anything's official government, it can get access, people can get access to it, reporters can get access to it under the Freedom of Information Act. So they set up a group of us, there were between 15 and 20 of us. Under the guise, we were part of a professional organization, the IEEE, the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineering, very, very reputable, very, very honest and reputable engineering society. So that's how they set us up. And we worked, I was on the committee for 14 years. I chaired the committee, I was deputy chair for 2 years, and I chaired the committee for 2 years. And it looked into space of all of these matters. And we all carried top secret clearances. And most of us were Academy of Sciences. I was Academy of Science, Academy of Astronautics. Most of us, we had representatives from Boeing and from Lockheed Martin and from a few other but we had government people and academics. And we studied this, and we were all could only say certain things. And now in the last 4 or 5 years, more has been declassified. I can say a little bit more. For example, and the way we were chosen to be discreet, and we had to be. I had to honor my security clearance, and I do. And so I looked for things that are declassified. Like in an article just a few days ago, they said when Truman was briefed, when he came in, we already had 10,000 documented examples of contacts. 10,000 in 48. And I knew that. And these 10,000 documentations were quite valid. And so we followed that activity. It was never. There's an organization called MUFON that came into existence and became very credible. I was asked at one point to be the director of MUFON. I had a very great academic life and I didn't want to do it. But it collects on all the state's information. And so what we're finding out is that a lot of this information now that have gained to a point where we really want to move on. And this book says beyond UFOs. So we're going to go beyond UFOs in my little talk. We're going to get into all of this is levels of consciousness. And in the end, we're going to talk a little bit about, Lloyd is going to talk about levels of consciousness and technology. And that's where we're going for this. And again, as much as I don't like reading, I want you to know that this just isn't from me. This book came out now in 2018. I know most of these, I know a lot of these people. 3,200 of us contributed to this research that's ongoing. This is just volume one. We've got 3 volumes in process. This is volume 1. Book is dedicated to the potential in humanity, which can bring a new age of understanding, cooperation, and peace among all intelligent entities, human and non-human, who reside in our vast multi-dimensional reality. It's just a great group of people. Most all of us are academics. And at this point, I'm going to set my 85-year-old body down before I fall down and read a little bit of this and comment on a little bit of it. Allow me to. Thank you. John Max, a friend of mine.
He's good.
Contact with non-human intelligence suggests that these experiences seem to be created as it is by design. Now, I think that's a breakthrough. What we're finding in consciousness and what they found in what we're finding in all of this research, and I'm sorry if it sounds like it's elitist, but it's not meant to be that, because we're not elitists, but there's a grand design of people who will be and are contacted. And a lot of us are contacted in one way or the other. Doesn't have to be a physical contact, it can very much be a level of consciousness where it's not necessarily a person to a non-human person, but it's something that you have in your dreams or in your consciousness or in your meditations where we're contacted. And so many of us, and that's not saying that you're bad and I'm good or the people who are good, but it's to be open to it. If you're really open to it, as I believe if you're really open to God, if you're really open to it, a lot of beautiful things can happen. But a lot of people just through, again, all that fear and mistrust and disinformation causes people not to be open to it. And they just say, well, this isn't really happening. This can't be true. I'm not saying you're bad, I'm not saying you're dumb, not saying, it's just that some of us are sort of more open to this and it sort of, we like it, we thrive on it, and then more of it's given to us, of it to educate all of us. Now go back to, there's one thing that is not then, if we look for a reason, totally true, you can debate. Eisenhower, supposedly after Truman, was approached through contacts by 2 alien groups to meet with them. And he went out to the deserts in the Southwest on a very secret mission. Only a handful of people went with him. They met with a group of Greys and a group of reptilians. And the bottom line is they said, we've been here monitoring you people, and to say in this book, we say the same thing. We've been monitoring you people for a long, long time. Why are you such warmongers? What you want to do is kill each other. And for no reasons. We know truthfully, there are 2 trillion, not B, trillion suns and stars and planets around these. And the probability of some kind of life. It may not be as the life and the oxygen that we need here. So some of us, I believe, at least one or two of these other groups live in a much warmer, and they use energy to exist and heat. So we see their craft being hot. They have to live in a much hotter atmosphere than it's too cold here on Earth. But we're a green planet, and there are not a lot of green planets, they say. You're a beautiful green planet. You're lush in all kinds of life. And here you go around killing everything. What's wrong with you guys? And it said, but we're going to continue to monitor you. And we'll bring you no harm. We want good for you. They told us Eisenhower, with one or two very small requests. Don't put nuclear or atomic weapons in space. You know, a couple of very small things. Well, every president gets a few notes on this when every new president comes in. But we had a past president that started a new Space Force and wants to put nuclear weapons in space. We shouldn't do that. As again, going back to government's administration, some are good and some are not so good. So that's the Eisenhower story. So in the 90s and into, I think I've worked in this group until 2004 when I left, or 2006. I think I was 92 to 2006. It was 14 years. And we accumulated a lot of information that's in here, and it's summarized in this, again, created if by design. This awakening, there was awakening that goes with being contacted. The awakening to higher awareness that comes out of the ego, which all of us have. An ego-shattering impact of encounters carries with it quite consistently certain interrelated psycho-spiritual changes. We find that there's a spiritual connection in all of this. This big human design is not just psychology. There's a spiritual aspect to it, especially if the experiences are enabled to work through their traumatic dimensions of what they just happened to them. So there's this great design, and there's a spiritualness to it, which goes in some great detail. It's not a religious. I mean, there's not a dogma associated to it, but it's a spiritualness. Edgar Mitchell felt that all contact modalities might actually be one phenomenon, which should not be studied as separate. When this research was done, someone said, well, let's do remote viewing. Let's do near-death experiences. Let's do out-of-body experiences. Let's do all of these stovepipes. And Ed Mitchell said, no, they're all one. They're all one dimension. They're all levels of consciousness that we should study as levels of consciousness, not as NDEs and OB out-of-body experiences or remote viewing or telepathic experiences, whatever. So bring it all into one. And this contact modality has developed viable hypotheses for the unification theory of consciousness and contact. He was working to that. A theory of consciousness and contact that go together. This is good stuff, by the way. If people want to buy this book, I can talk. It's on. So now we're talking about sort of the universal mind. Materialistic, military, industrial, materialistic greed concerns into the realm of transcendence. So we're going to hopefully transcend above that. this emergent level of consciousness is serving our adaptive, evolutionary, and survival techniques in a spiritual way. Mind at large is more acceptable, this whole great mind at large of a one mind is a concept that some people call God. And it is a conscious, purpose intelligent, capable of constructing time and space, kind of a guiding intelligence. We have finally arrived at the concept of a universal mind, this mind at large, this cosmic consciousness of what some call God. The newfound belief of God, life after death, the spirit world, reincarnation, and increased spirituality are all common. Again, I'm to some extent preaching to the choir. Some of you already know this thing of the reincarnation, Edgar Cayce. By the way, a lot of Edgar Cayce. He was contacted. I mean, those of you who know, I've talked about Edgar Cayce had a near-death experience. Once you've had some contact, and a lot of us have a contact as children. I did at age 5 when I had my near-death experience. Once you've pierced that veil, then it becomes so much easier to get further contact and be approached again and again through not necessarily physical contact, but through inner knowing about what's going on. Okay, I've got just 2 more things and then I'm going to be finished with my time. So this explains, we talk about intelligent and intent is the contact interacting with humans is what we need. We need intelligence, and we need the intent to do these things in a peaceful and open way. How being an organism, it elevates the role of information in nature and the fundamental stature of matter and energy. The world promotes, well, Edgar Mitchell, you can go online and find his books too. He talks about what he calls a global hologram. And his global hologram shows us a lot of this. And he talks, and again, I don't want to go on into it too much, but the theory of explaining how the whole creation learns, self-corrects, and evolves as a self-organizing, interconnected, holistic system. And then just some of the conclusions from this study. It's 1 or 2 conclusions, and then I'll stop. And because we're going to talk about, and so we're going to move beyond, but we're going to hear now after me instances of experiences, experiential data. It's all good. And we used to come and listen to these, but now there's more, thousands and thousands of them online now, so we can go online if we want to know more about these things. So there's going to be fewer and fewer opportunities for us to come together like this, although it's a beautiful group here today, to try to hear these stories, beautiful, beautiful stories of contacts and experiences that these people have had, and how, when you're contacted, you want to be a better person. You want to be more spiritual. And here are just some of the statistics. And I want to talk just about the abduction and a couple of things. There's this survey that was done with 3,200 people. There was agreement intentional contact or knowledge of one's role in a contact, abduction or traumatic procedures. In fact, almost 70% denied that they were taken. They said they claimed that they were neither coerced nor tricked nor forced into entering a craft. And they did not regret the experience. 80% of them did not regret the experience. And they rejected the assumption that their contact was in any way painful or negative. So the primary person of this thing involves an awakening to who we are as a species, that planet Earth participates in a universe of consciousness. Contacts equals expanded consciousness, and we should all be open to it. And in the future, balance our contacts with harmony and love and peace. And the collective cosmic human experience creates valuable wisdom and is good. Thank you.
So I think I'd like to just invite our next panelist, which would be Geraldine Orozco, to unmute, and I will pin her to the screen.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation to participate in this gathering. It's such a pleasure to be here. Yes, it was a very beautiful presentation by Neil. Thank you so much for that. And in some ways, it's a good segue into what I want to discuss. I guess what I'm going to be talking about is essentially how these interdimensional experiences are kind of processed through experiencers in the subconscious mind, and how they present themselves through different kinds of phases in their lives and scenarios. I'm going to talk about simultaneous lives and how hypnosis clients seem to travel through these experiences in out-of-body experiences similar to NDEs, and also the agreements, I guess the experiential agreements that seem to show up in these realms, in these subconscious realms that emerge as the experiencer begins to recall their experience. And then how it manifests in our physical world. And I think that we are very much a changing world, that we are quickly evolving, as was shared by Neil, that we are talking really about consciousness, and that really is the focus that I also focus in my work, trying to bridge the gap in between the non-physical and the physical, and then the mechanics of how to reach that information, essentially. So what I find is that when the human seems to connect to themselves, they have access to these subtle realms, and then they have access to the information. And I guess what is happening now is that because our human race is evolving so quickly into a multi-sensory, multi-dimensional race, genetically, we are being changed. We are being changed in many ways. And I do feel that all the changes that are happening in the world today, including disclosure, is I guess it's a precursor to that, but also it's a response to this evolutionary change that we're going through collectively. And I think that we see this, myself as a therapist, very closely by working with clients and observing these shifts and changes that they're experiencing, and the connections that they're accessing, the information that they're accessing. So Dick, is it okay if I share my screen? Is that possible?
Yes, I can make you a co-host. Just a minute.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm just gonna dive in really, really quickly because I don't have that much time, but I want to just impart just a couple main points here. when it comes to the concept of what we're going to be discussing. What I want to share with you is how the connection between interdimensional contact merges into people's lives and the kind of networks that are kind of, I guess, manifesting themselves. We're kind of mapping out this memory database that is available for us in the subconscious mind, that humans have access to. And contactees in particular are very interesting because contactees seem to have elevated intuition, elevated sensory, multisensory abilities, usually as a result of contact, but then also some already are born with these abilities and then just remember their experiences very vividly through their lives. And essentially, when we begin to observe, there's also patterns in contacts in family members that are contactees. And I find that really, really interesting because it seems that contact experience is running through families, in fact, through generations. That's where my area of research is, about the DNA aspect and the storage of this information. How is it storing within our organism, which is very much like a holographic system that is storing the memory as emotional data, vibrational frequency data within the body. And the memories are triggered through cosmic movements and evolutionary cycles that we're going through collectively, but also the human is going through their own cycle as well. And there seems to be a pattern within that cycle within families. So, they, at a certain age, the family member will begin to recall some of these memories. Usually it happens at a later time. And then they begin to open up memories of a younger time, and they begin to discover that probably they have contact all their lives. As Neil has mentioned, contact is not just visible contact right in front of you, physical. This is very much interdimensional contact. And our consciousness plays an immense role because a lot of these experiences are happening in dream state, out-of-body experiences, and even in these near-death experiences. So we're beginning to observe that and how it's manifested, that communication. But to begin, we need to understand that everything is deeply, deeply interconnected. Number one, we store within our ancestral DNA a database of history that is playing out in our everyday experiences. But in addition to that ancestral memory that connects us as one human race back to a certain origin, this also speaks to our starseed roots, that we actually do have, it seems, some very profound connections and memories of other intelligences and consciousness that are embedded within our DNA, and as DNA being a memory storage system, seem to emerge within these families at a certain time. Why do I say that? Because families seem to be having contact experience with similar species, races, or beings that are manifesting themselves in some sort of physical form that they recognize as similar in families. Also, the kind of experiences that they have might be similar, such as experiences in the hybridization program, experiences with near-death experiences or illnesses in the family that are being healed or supported through generations. And there's a dialogue, it seems, in these interdimensional subtle realms. So the memory that we're talking about today is not just in our ancestral memory, but also interdimensional. This is a memory that essentially what our ancestors are dreaming and contacting with interdimensionals, just like the Native Americans record their conversations with brothers and sisters of the stars in many ancient cultures through history. This is something that it's not just stories and fables that are passed down, but in fact potentially real experiences that are passed down through these generations with interdimensional consciousness. And I believe that this memory is stored within our bodies. One way that I encounter these memories, and the memories are triggered because I work as an epigenetic psychotherapist, working very closely with humans, their bodies, and how the body is literally storing memories. So memories are multi-layered, they're multi-sensory. Okay, well, let me actually go to this next slide here. So the way that memory is stored within the body, of course, one is the brain, right? But the next is also this multi-sensory system, which is actually where we store the majority of our information. So, for example, if a contactee has pain or parts of their body that have markings, when we take them into hypnosis or when we connect with them in a deeper DNA reprogramming, from that part of the body which is affected, or there's a side effect of their contact experience, they begin to recall memories, and they seem to emerge from the parts of the body that are affected. Okay, and it's the same thing with trauma. Anytime that we store trauma in the body, it is stored in many layers, in the subconscious mind and also in the physical. So the interesting element of this is that we seem to be holding contact experiences specifically also in our bodies. And when we take clients into hypnosis, they immediately have a connection between the sensory body and the memory. There's a trigger, there's a connection. And these can be through all 5 senses. That is stored, and the more that the human activates intuition and merges the combination between the physical senses and the non-physical senses, the more the human actually recalls the memories. And in hypnotherapy, this is something that is very interesting, because it begins to create kind of a whole picture of these experiences. Now, in these realms, what we're kind of looking at, this map that I created, and there's this map needs to be really explained in depth, but I'm just going to give you an overview, because there seems to be a kind of landscape that every single human seems to access at some point or another. And I find this very interesting, because people from different belief systems, whether it's religious systems or cultural systems, educational system background, they all seem to somehow navigate or touch in at least more than one of these realms in which these memories are stored. Okay, so our multidimensional body, we talked about the sensory memory system, is deeply connected to our physical body. Our physical body stores this information, and it seems to be that we have a spherical structure of database storage. So in the same way that our bodies are kind of spherical, toroidal-like in the way that they move life force through the body, it also seems to be that these layers of information can be accessed in a kind of spherical form as well. And I say that because there are, based on their vibrational frequency, based on their brain wave state, they access these layers in some kind of organized manner, some kind of organized manner. Okay, so ET contact seems to lie within the higher realms of the physical body. And let me just tune into this really quickly. I'm just going to show you real quickly the map of the physical body as I see it, and as been seen by many of contactees that kind of tune into this information, that we seem to be a multi-layered system, which is also multi-dimensional, and we seem to be navigating in and out of these dimensions when we are having these contact out-of-body near-death experiences. And really, these layers, these dimensional layers, seem to have some kind of formula in which emerge certain layers of consciousness. And so what we actually look like, our physical bodies, and me as an intuitive and also working with other intuitives that kind of map out the multidimensional body of humans, kind of begin to see a map that information is stored by frequency ranges in the body. The closest to the body, you're looking at the most densest memory storage system. The furthest away from the body, you're looking at the most subtle ranges of frequency. But also the oldest memories are stored within the furthest reaches of this multidimensional body, or the higher dimensional layers, which seems to be accessed by contactees when they have these contact experiences. So in hypnotherapy, when the clients are being taken under, they seem to progress through a certain order where they begin to access first past lives, which could be represented by these more denser realms closer to themselves. And then they begin to, as they go deeper, and remember that when we are in hypnosis, as we are deepening the state, brain waves are changing. So the depth of that brain wave is changing, and into and of course the frequency of the individual is also changing, which means that they can access higher bands of information. And so what happens is that they begin to access this information through their multidimensional body. And the navigation of this information is interesting because every hypnotherapy, and I work with many repeat clients over the years, there's some kind of order in the progression and evolution of how they access information based on their current spiritual evolution. There's a profound connection between that. The more that they access higher bands of frequency, spiritual evolution, the more information they have access to. And this is shown as a pattern in families. Okay, so when we work with one individual, the parent also has these experiences. The grandparent, we have been able to kind of observe their patterns of those experiences as well. So these patterns are extremely interesting. And what we see is that there seem to be contractual agreements within families. What are contractual agreements? This don't have enough time to go deep into this, and I do talk about this a lot on my YouTube channel, but experiential agreements are essentially, so to speak, the infinite potential as being organized within all of ourselves. And the human becomes fractalized. Okay, we kind of go through a refraction mechanism as we enter and as we discover ourselves within all these dimensional layers. But as we raise our vibrational frequency as a human, we have access to more of this information, which means that our memory is being activated. It's the ancestral interdimensional memory. That is a very important key. And it is within these memory layers of ourselves. Remember that there's a saying that we are not learning anything, but we are just remembering. That when the human begins to recall their experience, there is a powerful shift in their vibrational frequency and also in their multisensory abilities, because it is a must for them to have multisensory abilities in order to access this information. It goes hand in hand. So what is happening is that every single human seems to be, let's say, calibrated with a vibrational frequency or a signature that is a result of their DNA, their genetic structure. Their DNA creates a vibrational frequency that stores specific data and information. And the human has the ability to utilize that information to bring forth, essentially, through these experiential agreements, their entire ancestral lineage. Okay, so the more that the human integrates these out-of-body experiences, remember, these experiences are happening in dream state. And just to be clear, contact experiences are not just with, let's say, alien beings or species as we have known them. They can be with beings that look like, Jesus, for example, or angels or angelic beings. Why? Because the human mind produces imagery based on what is most comfortable to them, and sometimes contact with these beings is sometimes changed and screened in a way that is easy for the human to interact with these beings. Okay, we see this in hybridization program, and we also see this in general contact experiences. There's also a couple elements of healing contributions that are done, agreements for healing, that interdimensional beings are providing family lineages support through generations. So for example, healings will happen from simultaneous healings or healings over time through several different layers of experiences. And this is a really important element because it really speaks to the fact that we are one consciousness with these beings, and that there is a collective. There seems to be, of course, there's ranges between low vibrational experiences and high vibrational experiences, but it seems that the lower vibrational experiences are mostly the manipulations and interference of also the military, which do have their own agenda in these experiences and causing they are experimenting within these interdimensional interferences as well. Okay, so in these hypnotherapies, we are discovering that essentially contractual experiential agreements are agreements that are made by the soul in its awareness that it's one with all. And really, we are meeting ourselves in these contact experiences. These interdimensional beings that we come into contact with are really fractals essentially of our own self. Just the way the human race is one, we are also extending that oneness into these interdimensional races. And essentially, what I find is an evolution with contactees. Sometimes the contacts begin very traumatic, but as they begin to understand, as they begin to have hypnotherapy, their perception begins to become clarified. It begins to become refined in a sense, where they begin to understand that these contact experiences are not always what they seem to be. When you look at the underlayers, the reason behind these experiences usually catapult the human into a higher vibration evolution of consciousness. They are able to come into a more expansive state. It's always pulling the human forward somehow. And the healing element of it is to, I guess, come into a neutral 0 point, to be able to observe all unknown, and to become friends with that unknown in the best way possible, both biologically, biophysically, right? Because we are bioelectrical, emotional charge systems, and learning how to navigate that when it comes to the manifestation of these out-of-body experiences, because the concept of attraction of these experiences are very much based on ourselves. So when we have a lot of trauma, sometimes we have very wide ranges of experiences, really, really low experiences, but also are countered with these incredibly healing, incredibly beautiful, activating experiences with these beings. These generational agreements also have to do with the sustainability of this hologram, I guess you can say, or this matrix, because just the element of the hybridization program that we seem to be procreating and evolving and bringing and anchoring consciousness, souls into this realm in these dream states as well. And that seems to be an intergenerational, I guess you can say, agreement as well. So we are working as these human souls in more dimensions than one. In fact, what we do in dream state might be even more powerful and more impactful to the collective than what we do in the waking state. And the invitation is that we become conscious in waking state, lucid, as well as dream state, so that we can make sense of these experiences in a more conscious way. Of course, hypnotherapy is a powerful tool for that, but we can hypnotize ourselves. We can enter into the subconscious mind in order to become clear about our agreements in these experiences. And we navigate time is not linear. Just to end this, I know we're coming to an end here. Time is not linear. In fact, it is more of a spherical model that we are accessing this information based on our vibrational frequency in this present moment. And it's important that each human begins to work with their non-physical experiences, begins to recall these experiences as much as possible, because there seem to be a connection between these memories and also a biological element. We are becoming activated. We talk about activated DNA, but really our multisensory system becomes activated when we begin to recall these memories. And it is necessary for the humans to access that information because we are collectively evolving into a multisensory, multidimensional race. And so it's a wonderful opportunity to understand that these experiences should not be a fringe topic, but in fact something that we should discuss openly and begin to not even really think of it as aliens, in my opinion, but interdimensional beings and consciousness that we are interacting with in our own realms, understanding our agreements with them and our intentions as we move forward as a collective human race. So I think I will end it there. I hope I covered everything, but if anyone has questions, I'm really happy to dive deep into those things. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Geraldine.
Thank you.
The next panelist is Catherine Chappie. Catherine, I ask you to unmute, and I'm going to try to pin you onto the screen. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dick, for having me here today. I really appreciate being with all of you. And I loved what Neil and Geraldine had to share today because it segues into my outline that that I wrote up before I came here today. So it's really amazing how it's all connected. So what I wanted to talk about today is some of my own experiences and how it relates to all of the different topics that were discussed today. I'm very familiar with the Free Organization and Ray Hernandez's book that he put together called Beyond UFOs. I was part of this the mini surveys that went out to compile the data for that book. And I was so excited to hear about that book because all of my experiences throughout my lifetime have been part of what that book really talks about and really tries to prove through the data. And it was exciting to hear that this was the very first research study on contactees that was so vast. I think there were over 4,000 of us that partook in the 3 different surveys that were put out. So I encourage anybody that's interested in this topic to get that book, and you can get it through Ray's website. It is he's now merged it into a different website, and I believe it's called A Greater Reality, and he's offering these books for free because he wants to make sure that everybody has this information. It's that paradigm shifting, and it is that important. So if anybody's interested in that, you can find it through the website. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about my own experiences and how that played out for me, but not just about my experiences, but how these experiences we are all able to access. We're all able to access our own higher wisdom, our own unique connection to God, source, our higher power, whatever we call that, whatever you're comfortable with. And what I have found through my journey is that as a child, I had a lot of experiences that kind of set me up for a lifetime of spiritually transformative experiences and UFO ET contact. That being, as a kid, I had frozen experiences where when I was in my bed, I couldn't move and I was aware of a presence around me. At the time, I was very young and I was afraid because I was indoctrinated into a religious understanding of the world where there was a hell when we die and there was a devil. And I was very afraid of that. So I thought that this being that I sensed right next to me when I was frozen and couldn't move as I was waking up was the devil. Therefore, I was so frightened and scared. That happened to me a few times as a kid. I also had a lot of different types of experiences where I should have actually died, but didn't. And I also had experiences of some traumas where I have memories of those traumas, but viewing those traumas outside of my body, like in the corner of a room, looking down at it so as not to feel the pain of the trauma. So I think those early experiences really set me up to understand that I'm not just this physical body, that there is a whole other realm and a whole other dimension to who I am. And I knew this just from what I had experienced. And I questioned everything about religion and what I was being told about the dogmas of religions. And I had an understanding as a young child that those things were not, that just didn't make sense to me because I felt that God was love. And why would God make all of us, but yet only few of us could get to heaven when we died? Didn't make sense to me. So through my years, I ended up starting to question some things that were happening when I was older. And I started to have some medium experiences where I would see the spirit world. And a friend of mine had died, and I saw him pass right in front of me, like as if he were full-bodied, as I was having a conversation about him. And so I got curious about mediumship and started to go to a spiritualist church by my house. And this was all very synchronistic. I didn't even know anything about spiritualism, but I got involved in that. And once I started to learn how to meditate is when everything really opened up for me. And it was through these experiences of quieting the mind and going into a deep stillness within myself and asking to be shown the spirit world, my relatives that had deceased. I would ask for help, for guidance. I would start having a lot of experiences and having different types of knowings that were guiding me through my life. And one of the things that I had done was that I started to journal and keep track of these experiences. And for 17 years now, I have been journaling my spiritual experiences, my dreams, synchronicities, and all the different contacts that I've had. I have found that to be really beneficial because what I have found that is what you pay attention to grows. So when I pay attention to these things and I write them down or I draw what I have seen in my dreams, even if I don't understand it at the time, eventually it will make sense to me and I will understand it and it will have meaning to what's going on in my life. So all of these things are really connected in that Once I started to meditate and open up consciously in that way, a lot of things started happening where I was able to, see the spirit world more clearly with intention. I would ask for them to come and give messages, not for me, but for others. So I was able to give messages at the Spiritualist Church. And I did that for several years. And I sat in circle every week. And we practiced doing the mediumship. And then we would give messages to people on Sundays. So with that, I had an awakening, a spiritual awakening in 2008. And it was very profound. I had been asking to meet my spirit guides, and they started to come to me. And I was having a unitive experience with God. And it's hard to put into words, but it was just such a beautiful, blissful experience for me. But I know that it scared people around me because they didn't understand it. And so when I was telling them that I was talking to my guides and my deceased loved ones and relatives on the other side, of course, they were afraid because they didn't understand that kind of experience. So I got to experience what that was like, not feeling supported on the physical realm, but also feeling so supported in the spiritual realm. And I was in two worlds at once, and it was really beautiful. And after that experience kind of calmed down a little bit, I did some research and looked online, and I found this word, Kundalini awakening, and I found that this was something that had happened to me. I had a full-blown Kundalini awakening where my consciousness expanded and I was one with God. And so I, at the time, was being guided that I was being prepared. I felt like I was kind of going through an initiation of some kind. And they said that many people would be waking up, many people would be having spiritual experiences, and that this was kind of preparing me so that I could help people and, help them to know that they're not going crazy. Because in our culture, a lot of times people that are having these kind of profound experiences, be it spiritually transformative experiences, unitive experiences, NDE experiences, contact experiences. If we talk about these experiences, oftentimes we are met with either a blank stare or crickets, which means there's no response. And there's not a lot of support for people that are going through these experiences. So part of my mission, part of my understanding of why I'm here is to help people that are having these experiences. And so I have 3 groups that I have on Zoom. And if anybody is interested in any of them, you can contact me at my email, and I'll give you my email. It's ufoetexperiencers@gmail.com. And I have 3 groups. They meet on the 1st, 2nd, and 4th Tuesday of the month at 7 o'clock. The first Tuesday is Safe Space Sharing Group. And that's where we get together and we'll talk about our spiritual experiences. And it can have anything to do with any of these topics that were talked about today. And anybody that has a high interest in that too is also welcome. And the second group is UFO ET Experiencers, which is a speaker question and answer group. And then the third one is Spiritual Experiencers, which is also a speaker question and answer group. So I just wanted to put that out there because that's one of the things that I do. And I have found it very rewarding, and a lot of people really enjoy having a safe space to talk about these kind of things. All right, so I guess what I'll do is I'll just go on about what was happening with me and how it can be beneficial also to you, because like I said, what I've learned is that we all have these abilities. It's not for just certain people. There are people that are not interested in this at all. And I suspect it's not any of you that are here today, or you wouldn't be here. So, but people that are very interested in these topics are usually very open to them. And so what I recommend is, if you really want to tap into these types of experiences for yourself, would be to just start keeping track of your experiences, journaling, writing down your dreams. Even if you don't understand the dream, I think it's important. What I have found that, like I said, over time, it makes sense what's happening. And I get a lot of information in my dreams about what's going on in my life, about what's coming up. I get warnings. I get just all kinds of really helpful information. The other thing I wanted to mention is that there is a state where we are in the hypnagogic state, and that's generally 2 times a day. And then sometimes when we're driving, but you don't really want to be too deep into that state when you're driving, because you want to be aware. But when we're falling asleep at night and when we're first waking up in the morning, and that state of consciousness is very important. And what I learned through my own experiences is, if I just keep my eyes closed as I'm waking up in the morning, I can just stay in that really peaceful state. And I talk to God, I talk to my guides, and I will ask them, what is it that I need to know right now that it will be helpful for me and others? And I'm given symbols and signs, and sometimes I'll hear things, or sometimes I'll go into another dream and I'll be shown. And then I write that down. I write down whatever I get. And it is always very helpful. The way that we can connect to our team, and we all have a team, and this is what I have discovered through my journey. They really want to help us, and they want to see us heal, because they know how difficult it is for us to be here. They really look at us like we are such brave people, brave souls to choose to come to Earth, because they know how difficult it is. And because when we come to Earth, before we come here, we choose to forget who we are, who we really are. And we kind of go to sleep for a while until we start to question things and we start to wake up. And when we start to wake up out of the dream, which is kind of this life, that's when we can have access to these beings that are part of our lineage. And what I've discovered through my journey is that, the lineage that I have, there's so many different beings that started coming to me after I had my awakening in 2008. The very first one that I saw in my meditation was a feline being. And that might sound funny, but this being was not a feline, like a pet or a cat. This was a being that was standing, and it had feline features. And I remember asking somebody that was a contactee at the time about it. And he confirmed, he's like, oh yeah, those are the feline beings. I've seen them. And I thought, oh, okay, that's interesting. And, I wasn't afraid. I was just curious. And then I went about my business and did, mediumship and stuff at the church. And at that time, it was a lot of spiritual, like beings from, earth and things like that. But then over time in 2016 is when I started to have a lot of contact with beings. And the first ones that started to show up for me were the felines. Again, very first ones. And they started to show up around my house. In my trees, there were green lights of these orbs that were in my trees. And I would go outside and film them, and I would talk to them. And I would ask questions. And what they told me is that I am them and they are me, that we are one. And I thought that was very interesting. It was hard for me to wrap my human brain around that. But then when I looked at the videos and I slowed them down, I started to look at them individually, I could see faces in those orbs. And I could see the feline faces in some of them. And in one of them, there was a lion being, a fairy, looking right at me in this green orb. And when I asked, so when I saw this, this was in 2016, I was really taken back because a week earlier, I had been sitting in circle with other spiritualist mediums, and people were seeing these tall, like feline beings around me, and they had no idea about the experience I was having. And so we went into a meditation, and in the meditation, it was a guided meditation. We were asked to look at our book of life. And so my book of life was on a podium, and underneath my book of life was a little fairy and a lion being. And that was a week before they showed up in the orb that was in my tree that came to me during this UFO ET contact. And when I asked about that a week prior, I asked the fairy that was in my guided meditation. She had these shears with her, the garden shears. And I just said to her, "What's that for?" And she said, "We're going to be weeding." I'll never forget it. So that to me was the start of a really profound healing experience that I was partaking, starting really in 2016 when these beings started showing up. And they really helped me tremendously through that whole healing journey. And it took several years for me to get through that. There was we've all heard of the, I'm sorry, it escapes me now, but where you're walking through like the kind of like the fires of hell on earth in a way, just trying to figure out what's what. And yeah, so there was a lot of that kind of thing going on. There was like a duality of what one would perceive as negative experiences, although they are really healing and helpful at the end when it's over. So I felt really supported and guided through those experiences. And what they also did for me is that they gave me so much proof of their existence that they allowed me to film them. They allowed me to document my journey, and left me so much evidence of their existence, of these different things that were happening, that I couldn't deny it, even at times when I start to think, maybe I'm going a little crazy, I can look back at my documentation and say, no, this happened and this happened and this happened. And, I was able to have pictures and videos and things like that to really help me in that way. So I think, what else do I want to say? If you're somebody that really is interested in this and want to connect with your lineage of helpers, because that's really what they are. What I've discovered is I have had lifetimes with many different beings, and we all have. So, and these beings, they come in the vibration of absolute love. They only want what is best for us. They love us and this planet. And they really want to see us as equals with them. They're not above us. They're just in a different dimension, in a higher dimension. And they're hoping that we will be able to, as a human species, elevate our consciousness enough so that, the whole world understands that we really are one, that we are really love at the core, and that we're all in this together. One of the things I was shown is that we are ascending as a planet and as a people. And at the time, this was in 2008, I asked my guides about that. And I said, well, where are we going? I thought we were going somewhere. And they said, no, it's happening here on the earth. And I said, oh, okay. And they said, yeah. And I said, well, who's gonna do that? And they said, everybody. And I was like, really? Are you sure about that? I remember just saying, even my ex-husband, and they said, yes, even your ex-husband. And I was like, all right, well, I guess, if he can do it, we can all do it. I was a little bitter back then, but yeah, so that really taught me, that we are all going to go. We're all ascending. It's going to happen for everyone. Might not all happen at the same time, but it is definitely going to happen. And they showed me what the world would look like once we were all ascended. And when I saw, in my view, I was outside, the colors were just so bright and beautiful, and it just felt so clean. And so I just know we're headed in a really good, we're headed to a really good place here on Earth. And people that are having these experiences, be it spiritual experiences, NDEs, contact experiences, unitive experiences, I feel like we are all part of this. We're kind of like the first ones that are at that, we're kind of pushing the boundaries, and so it's hard for many of us, or it has been hard up until now, because there hasn't been support for people that are having these experiences. A lot of times people have been ostracized, people have been put in psychiatric wards, people have been completely abandoned by their families and told they were crazy. And so I think the fact that we're all getting together, we're all having these conversations now, we're able to do this over Zoom, which is an absolute blessing. And word is getting out on YouTube, people are really curious about this stuff. And I'm so excited and so happy to be part of this, to see you all here today, and to know that you're all part of this too. And I envision a beautiful world for all of us in the very near future. So Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Catherine. We're gonna have questions at the end, if that would be okay. But our last panelist is Lloyd Kramer.
Well, first, let me say that all the opinions and interpretations I'll be expressing today are mine, not any of the many organizations with which I'm affiliated. So if you have any concern, bring them to me. I can ignore them as well as anybody. Now, this is the ARE, and in ARE circles, many people are interested not only in ancient civilizations like Egypt, Atlantis, but also in the Bible. But you don't often hear them discussed in the same lecture. So my title today is Extraterrestrial Devices in the Bible and Other Ancient Texts. Now, one handy trick in doing this type of research is to use the King James Bible, not because it's perfect, but because it's the closest to a literal translation. In later versions, the translators guessed at what things really meant and were often wrong. In the King James, they just translated, whether they really understood what they were describing or not. Here's an example. Students of education. What's the most famous thing from Atlantis? The Firestone, right? The terrible crystal. People sometimes ask, if Casey's story of Atlantis is correct, why isn't any of it in the Bible? I quote from Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 22, King James Version, and the likeness of the firmament upon the heads of the living creature was as the color of the terrible crystal stretched forth over their heads above. Yes, the Atlantean terrible crystal is mentioned explicitly in the Bible. And not only is it mentioned, but it's clear from the context that everyone of that day, at least everyone who's going to read Ezekiel, had not only aware of the terrible crystal, but had actually seen it, because Ezekiel uses it as a color reference. Let's look at Genesis, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. How can two big cities get wiped off the face of the earth? Well, the people of Hiroshima, Nagasaki might have an idea about that. The angels directed Lot and his family to save their lives by running to the mountain. Well, a large landmass is good protection from a nuclear blast. The cities were consumed with brimstone and fire, went up as the smoke of a furnace. Sounds like a mushroom cloud. Lot's wife didn't make it, but maybe not because she looked back, but because she delayed in order to look back. Her body might later resemble a pillar of salt, owing to the effects of radiation, such as complete dehydration. Lot was directed to hide in a cave, maybe for protection until the radiation fallout cleared. Now, atomic weapons in biblical times might seem far-fetched, except that the Bible isn't the only ancient account of atomic blasts. The Mahabharata clearly describes a catastrophic explosion, and I quote, Gurkha flying a swift and powerful Vimana hurled a single projectile charged with the power of the universe. An incandescent column of smoke and flame as bright as 10,000 suns rose with all its splendor. It was an unknown weapon, an iron thunderbolt, a gigantic messenger of death, which reduced to ashes the entire race of the Vrijnis and the Adhakas. The corpses were so burned as to be unrecognizable. Hair and nails fell out, pottery broke without apparent cause, and the birds turned white. After a few hours, all foodstuffs were infected. To escape from this fire, the soldiers threw themselves in streams to wash themselves and their equipment. It's interesting that ancient Sanskrit writings include units of measurement equivalent to the light year and to atomic dimensions. Now, a civilization wouldn't need such units unless they dealt with atomic power. Dr. Robert Oppenheimer, who worked on the Manhattan Project to develop the atomic bomb, was very familiar with ancient Sanskrit literature. When asked in an interview at Rochester University 7 years after the Alamogordo nuclear test, whether that was the first atomic bomb ever to be detonated, after a long pause, his reply was, well, yes, in modern history. So why was he so interested in ancient Vedas? Maybe because he was there. That's one of the main indicators of past lives. What times and places in history attract you? And how did he develop the atomic bomb so quickly? He didn't have to develop it from scratch. He remembered. So how are you doing? You cool with the possibility of atomic power in biblical times? Okay. How about devices of extraterrestrial origin? Yeah, there are a few, but they were so powerful and so far in advance of the contemporary technology that religions tended to spring up around them and confuse the issue. I think the Ark of the Covenant was such a device. It was basically a black hole in a can. It generated a quantum mechanical singularity above it. It was a gravity or anti-gravity generator. It threw a heck of an electromagnetic field. It could restore the original matrix of anything placed in the field, so it had healing and rejuvenation properties. And it interfaced with human consciousness in an incredibly fast and powerful feedback loop. We're talking nanoseconds. To be in the presence of the Ark required great preparation and discipline, physically and spiritually. Why? Because it interfaced with the structural fabric of the universe. It amplified your consciousness. Talk about instant karma. It amplified whatever your pattern was, and so was potentially dangerous. There's the Old Testament story of the high priest Aaron's sons being burned to ashes when they entered into the presence of the ark. The Bible says they offered strange fire before the Lord. Some people think alien fire would be a better translation. Moses had to do a lot of talking to keep Aaron on the job. He was quite disenchanted when his sons got burned up. And I think the Islamic Kaaba stone in Mecca is a similar device. It's also known as the black stone. Good name for a black hole generator. In England, they call them black suns. Black hole, black sun, black stone. Sounds similar to me. And it isn't actually in that big black box that the Muslims walk around. It's hundreds of feet below ground. Why? Shielding. The Great Pyramid is made of 2.3 million huge blocks. Why so big and heavy? Various reasons, but I think one of them is shielding. Why did Solomon's temple have to be so large? To the glory of God, maybe, but I think also for shielding of the device it was constructed to contain. Now you have to be careful what you mean by ark. There was the box that the Hebrews constructed in the wilderness, but I think that was just a container for the device. Scholars don't think Moses had the ark until they were in the wilderness, but I think he did. So let me give you a little different version of the Moses story. Until Moses discovered that he was Hebrew and chose to join his own people, he was considered a son of Pharaoh, a prince of the royal court. As such, he had access to every bit of knowledge of the Egyptian priesthood, the initiations in the temples, the Great Pyramid, the king's chamber, the coffer, everything. And I think the ark device was kept in the coffer, in the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid. Why do I think so? The interior volume of the coffer is exactly half the exterior volume. The Ark of the Covenant, the box, would fit almost exactly inside the coffer. And the interior of the Ark box is exactly half the volume of the exterior. So you have perfect dimensional octaves in the musical sense, factors of 2. All these guys, Egyptians, Hebrews, were using the same technology. We've just forgotten what it was. So Pharaoh eventually told Moses, fine, you want to go, go. Close the door on the way out. And then he sends the army after him. But why? In the C.P. DeMille movie, it was because his wife nagged him and belittled him until he agreed. Now, heaven knows that does happen, but I don't think it was the case here. I think Moses went into the Great Pyramid and grabbed the Atlantean power crystal from the coffer on his way out. Then Pharaoh discovered it missing and said, "Whoo, that wasn't part of the deal. Go get him, boys." As the children of Israel were fleeing from Egypt, the Bible tells us, and the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of a cloud to lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, to go by day and night. Well, if Moses had a black hole in a can, that's exactly what would happen. There'd be a quantum mechanical singularity above it, a powerful spiral vortex, flaming electromagnetic fields, and water condensing out of the atmosphere. It'd be quite a show. So how did Moses get across the Red Sea? Well, if he had an anti-gravity device with him, it wouldn't be that hard. Exodus doesn't tell us much. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. How? You have to cross-reference that story to a similar one in Joshua chapters 3 and 4. At that time, the people of Israel needed to cross the Jordan River, which was running at flood levels. And they used the same technique that Moses had used. And I quote, "And as they that bear the ark were come unto Jordan, and the feet of the priests that bear the ark were dipped in the brim of the water, for Jordan overfloweth all his banks all the time of harvest, the priests that bear the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground in the midst of Jordan. And all the Israelites passed over on dry ground until all the people were passed clean over Jordan. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of Jordan from before you until ye were passed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up from before us until we were gone over." They use the word as meaning in the same manner, by using the anti-gravity properties of the ark. So when they finally did get around to building the box for the thing, it had to be just right. "And they shall make an ark of shittim wood, and thou shalt overlay it with pure gold, within and without. And thou shalt cast 4 rings of gold for it, and put them in the 4 corners thereof. And thou shalt make staves of shittim wood, and overlay them with gold. And thou shalt put the staves into the rings by the sides of the ark, that the ark may be borne with them." So why did it need to be just that way? That's an electrical specification. Shittim wood is porous, like cedar. It's an excellent electrical conductor, insulator. Just what you need to carry a black hole device. And gold is an excellent conductor, expensive electrical contacts are made of gold. I think the Essenes had a secret job no one knows about. I think they were on continuous 24-hour standby to receive the Ark of the Covenant in the event that it needed to be removed from Jerusalem. That's why the Essenes lived remote from the city, Mount Carmel, Qumran, far enough away to be safe, but close enough to get the Ark if necessary. Among the Dead Sea Scrolls discovered at the Essene community in Qumran were some copper plates. They describe the location of 64 objects that were used in conjunction with handling the ark. The famous archaeologist Vendel Jones found one of them, the sacred anointing oil. They called it anointing oil, but it's actually a conductivity gel. The ark threw a heck of an electromagnetic field. So the conductive oil would bring the induced electric charge to the outer skin away from your internal organs. This isn't some deep spiritual mystery. It's pure physics. It's Maxwell's equations. By the way, the archaeologist Vendel Jones was the inspiration for Indiana Jones. Vendel Jones was known to his friends as Vendy, which became Indy. So don't be afraid to apply logic and to have your own opinions on the Bible or other ancient writings, even if no one else seems to agree with you. Because if people think your ideas are a bit weird, remember this famous quotation from Arthur Schopenhauer. All truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as being self-evident. Thank you very much.